when you see Europeans from the mindset of let's support the US hegemony or the Western hegemony in Ukraine, because if we lose in Ukraine, that would send a bad message to China, that would break the, somehow destroy the Western hegemony. From that moment coming to what's going on right now with the case of Greenland, they're trying so hard to convince the Trump administration not to capture Greenland. On the other hand, you see the Canadian Prime Minister saying that the rules-based international order, he's a banker, he knows what he's talking, is over. What is happening in the mind of those Europeans and together with Canada? Are they really feeling that some sort of sea changes are happening?
How could you not if you were an observer of the world scene? It's happening without Donald Trump. It's happening because, as I've said many times before, and I will keep saying, the power is moving out of the West and going to the East. And it's a dramatic transition. There's a briefing making its way around the internet right now. Well, there's actually two. There's one by a 95-year-old Singaporean who is probably one of the leading experts on China in the world. And there's another one that is strictly economic in the way it's presented. And they throw up on the screen, and I think it's fairly accurate, about 100 different parameters of everything from technology to farming to you name it, plastics, you name it, and who's in the lead and who's got more in terms of potential for the future. It's China in almost 70% of those areas, and some of them are pretty crucial. It is also quite clear to Carney and people like him who watch the world he's a businessman, really. He's not a Trudeau type. He's a businessman. When they look at the world, they see this power seepage. And what's happening is the United States is very incoherently, in my view, trying with this kind of Hobbesian strategy, which I've called it, to deflect that, arrest it, stop it, whatever. A lot of Venezuela's motivation, for example, was to teach other South American leaders what we can do to them, because China is stealing a march on us in South America, hugely so. 60% of the commerce with most of the major nations in South America, including your own, is with China, not with the United States. That's a huge 15, 20-year flip over. And that's taking place almost everywhere in the world, as this 95-year-old Singaporean was pointing out. And we don't like it. We don't like it at all. And so far, our way of dealing with it, and I even saw this in the second Obama administration, I saw a little bit of it in the Bush administration, has been sanctions and military, and trying to create the kind of chaos that we think will arrest that movement of power. We're wrong. It's not going to do it. And we want to suck China into that contest in a kinetic sort of way. And we're not going to do that either, because China is not going to do itself in. They're going to stand aside and let us kill ourselves. And thank you very much. We're doing a pretty good job of that. Carney recognizes that, and I think is trying to set trying to set Canada up for an alternative world that he knows is inevitably coming. And this gave him an opportunity to do it rather dramatically because of Trump's incompetence in dealing with that very world. I don't think for a moment that Carney likes what he's doing or enjoys what he's doing or feels like that, it's not some real rupture with the past. It is. But he understands that it's got to happen in order to accommodate himself with the growing power of China and China's allies. We're talking about probably 60% of the world's GDP huddled around that group, if not more. Think back to 1945 when we had 51% of the GDP and the rest of the world was prostrate at our feet. We're never going back there. We are never going back there. And in fact, we're going far away from that. And China's taking over. And that makes a lot of people in this country, especially a lot of these billionaires who are in the shadows behind Trump, really angry. They want to do something about it. And from time to time, they want to do something kinetic about it. And things like Iran and Venezuela and so forth are aimed as much at China and saying, get out of here, as they are aimed at any specific reason involving that country, other than, as Larry's absolutely right, enriching Trump and his cronies like Singer and like others too, who are into making diesel out of heavy crude oil.
Well, yeah. I mean, just let me expand a little bit on this. You know, the people in the United States that are, getting all alarmed about this threat from China, they remind me of the guy that moved to Minnesota and wakes up in December and sees that there's snow on the ground and is shocked that there's snow on the ground. Oh my God, where did the snow come from? That's what you get in Minnesota in winter. Uh, the Chinese, in terms of their economic involvement in Central and South America, for God's sake, have been. This hasn't been a damn secret. They've been doing it, 30 years with my personal experience. I mean, I did a lot of when we set up Berg Associates in 1998. We did a lot of product counterfeiting investigations in the Cologne Free Trade Zone in Panama. For God's sakes, the Chinese were everywhere. The Chinese were managing, there are three major container ports that move an enormous volume of product that's at the north end of the Panama Canal in Cologne. The Chinese owned those and managed it, had been doing so. And then, the casinos, I did some compliance work for a couple of the casinos, to try to sort out money laundering threats. They're filled primarily with Chinese gamblers. So my point here is that the West is pretending, though, God, we got to stop China. They're spreading. They've been there. They've been doing this. And so you got to step back and say, why is it that we're now all of a sudden so obsessed with this? I mean, what's changed? And what I see that's changed is that America, through its own self-inflicted wounds, by destroying its own industrial base, while China has happily gone on building up its industrial base, that we're mad at them for doing what we've been unable to do, or or for us doing the opposite of what they've done. And our attitude, though, is instead of, because remember, part of what is happening in China is happening because of our opening to China back under Nixon, and that they've they've responded to that by turning from a strict agrarian communist state to, we like to say that they're a communist state, but by God, you know if that's communism, then it puts capitalism to shame. They are commercially savvy and incredibly productive. And so instead of us embracing them, saying, "Hey, we're glad that we could help you become what you are," and finding a way to have a partnership with them, to work with them in some sort of collaborative fashion, all we can do is demonize the hell out of them, convince ourselves that they're a damn enemy that we've got to stop, we've got to destroy, we've got to go to war with them. Because you hear that rhetoric coming out of, the deputy commander at Indo-PACOM, what used to be called PACOM, and then when the Chinese react to our threats, we act surprised. I you know, I think we've lost our damn minds.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And this 95-year-old Singaporean, I recommend it to anybody who wants to watch it. It's on YouTube. Deng Xiaoping essentially articulated exactly what Larry just described way back there when. And no expectation, I'm sure, on his part that he would be so singularly successful in using us to kill ourselves. But that's essentially what we've done. A lot of this economic change is happening because we made so many errors, not least of which was our companies evacuating the country and going to China. And what Larry's talking about in terms of comedy collaboration and cooperation and so forth was the reason the president I served allowed Colin Powell, as his Secretary of State, to have one portfolio that he could operate in, despite Cheney and despite Rumsfeld, with regard to the WTO and membership therein for China, which now Republicans are excoriating us for having done because we gave China, well, I'm sorry, were you looking at the world? Did you understand what was happening? Why didn't you do something domestically to restrict this industry from moving so wholesalely to China and taking the jobs with it and so forth? This is as much our fault as it is China's artistry or China's strategy or China's competence. And, now we're reacting because, man, it's gotten out of hand. And it is out of hand in some respects. But there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. But I think Larry's right. You need, because of two things primarily, a lot of other things too, nuclear weapons, and the need, as Putin has talked about again and again, to get a treaty regime again and to put some curbs on these things before they bankrupt us all, including Xi Jinping, and the climate crisis. We're not doing much on it, and Trump is and this is inexplicable to me, other than the man doesn't like anything that doesn't correspond with his morality. The climate crisis is going to eat our lunch, and it's going to start eating our lunch more and more every freaking year that goes by until the end of the century, when it's going to be too late to do anything, and we're all hovering somewhere trying to figure out what to do when the new technology hasn't put us on Mars or something like that. The situation in 1991-92 was, let's build a world that we all can cooperate and collaborate in because we have these challenges, not least of which was nuclear weapons. Then we got a series of presidents who didn't know what they were doing and corresponded mostly to the interests that we're seeing behind Trump right now and made a mess of things. And then along comes Trump to kind of put the chapeau on that mess. And that's essentially what he's doing. We have messed the world up ourselves, particularly from George H.W. Bush's defeat at the hands of Israel, mind you, and the presidents that came along after him who were inexperienced and in some cases grossly inexperienced and listened to these people and did their bidding. Everything from the clean break strategy to what Trump is doing now with Israel, which is just unconscionable for one leader of one country to do with another leader of another country. Absolute George Washington rolling in his grave, spinning in his grave over it. That's where we are. Regardless of who is the giant in the world, we aren't anymore. And we're angry about it.
Yeah.
What else motivates people like J.D. Vance and others around Trump who might have a brain, but are more or less in cooperation with him in his idiocy?
Yeah. Here is, Larry, what J.D. Vance said about the main goal, the main objective in Greenland.
Simple fact is, Greenland matters to American national security because our entire missile defense relies on security in the Arctic. This is something the media who's obsessed with Greenland, they completely forget why Greenland matters. What if, God forbid, I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, but what if a foreign country launched a missile at the United States of America? We would need control over the Arctic in order to shoot that missile down. Our entire missile defense system depends on that Arctic security. Meanwhile, the Chinese and the Russians and even the Danes who control Greenland admit that they want to control that facility. They want to control that island, that landmass. That would make us weaker. That would make our country more endangered. That would mean that if the president is negotiating with a foreign leader, he would have less leverage because they would be able to realistically threaten the sovereignty and the territorial safety of the United States of America. We're not going to let that happen.
Bullshit.
Yeah. I've lost all respect for J.D. Vance. I mean, what he said there is just a lie, one lie after another. So again, let's go back and look at the history. of the last 75 years. The United States has signed an agreement of, I don't know if you want to call it mutual defense or whatever with Greenland / Denmark. But essentially, Greenland was always seen as following under the security umbrella of NATO. And during that entire period, there was never a single time that we asked to do something or deploy forces or build up a base that Greenland or the Denmark told us to go pound sand and told us no, just the opposite. So then you step back and you have to ask the question, why the sudden obsession? Now, the notion that Russia wants to take Greenland and that's a priority for them. Why? Right now, because of the size, the landmass of Russia, they surround 53% of the Arctic Circle, with Canada having about another 40%, and then the rest taken up with ocean. So the notion that Russia needs Greenland to, quote, control the Arctic, that's just a lie. Number one, but number two, how do you control the Arctic? We say these words. What does that mean? Does that mean you can sail around it, sail through it, that you can deploy personnel there? Well, guess what? The United States can't. We've got one icebreaker. We actually have two, but one's broken. So we got one. And we've got Norway's building us another one that's supposed to be ready in 2 years. And then we got 5 or 6 more on order that probably won't show up until 4 or 5 years from now. How about Russia? Well, Russia's got 40 icebreakers. 10 of them are nuclear powered. So we're not even technologically in the game. And yet here we are and trying to pick a fight with Greenland and with Denmark for what purpose? Because there is no exigency out there right now. Now, China's not threatening to take it over. We continue this lie, gaslighting the American public that, Iran is a threat. Iran's a terrorist threat. We got to stop them. Russia's a threat. They're coming after us. They're expansive. China's a threat. And yet, take those 3 countries, total up their total number of military bases overseas. Total up the number of times they have attacked other countries, killed people, citizens of other countries. And you know what? The only country that stands atop that list is not China, is not Russia, is not Iran. It's the United States. If we follow Bibi Netanyahu's definition of terrorism, which I endorse, he presented it on Bill Buckley's show, Crossfire, but it was back in 1987. And the definition was very simple, elegant: the use of violence against civilians for political purposes.
Mm-hmm.
With that as a definition of terrorism, the number one terrorist country in the world, by definition, is the United States. Indisputable. At a minimum, we caused the deaths. We contributed to the deaths of 500,000 Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War because of our support for Saddam Hussein and providing the precursor chemicals that were used to make mustard gas that was used against the Iranians. It's not Russia that invaded Afghanistan or Iraq twice. So, and frankly, it's not Russia that started the civil war in Syria. We did that. We've got a legion, buckets of blood on our hands, and we spend all of our time demonizing these other countries, claiming that they represent some enormous threat to us, when in fact we're the biggest threat to us, not them.
I would add that we're the only country in the world that has the degree of sanctions on other countries that we have, which
Yeah.
are in some cases more deadly to the people of that country, not necessarily their leaders, but the people of that country, than bombs. And the second greatest terrorist in the world is Bibi Netanyahu and Israel. If you saw what Francesca Albanese released recently, and I think she's right, I think the total of people that are going to be under that beautiful city that Trump is going to build, underneath the concrete, is closer to 300 or 400,000, 75% of whom are women and children, than it is to the Hamas Health Ministry's numbers, which are preposterous.
Yeah.
Colonel, what is the objective if what JD Vance just said is not the case? What is the objective in Greenland? Because
Want to know?
Denmark is.
How about our ambassador in Denmark? The man Donald Trump sent to represent the United States in Denmark. Look at his comments. He's a billionaire. I can't remember his name right now. I hope I never hear his name again, but he covets. Look at what he said. He covets the minerals underneath the ice cap on Greenland, and he'll delineate them for you. And supposedly, one of the first things he said when presenting his credentials to the people in Denmark was, "We want Greenland, and we will have it." This is Trump's ambassador.
Yeah. His name, I guess, is Ken Howry. Just looked
Yeah,
it up.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and well, that's the other thing that we keep hearing. We go to Venezuela ostensibly because they got rare earth minerals. We go to Greenland because they got rare earth minerals. We got rare earth minerals here in the United States.
hmm
I mean, there's just north of me, 30-minute drive. You can go to the Mosaic mine. It's one of these huge mining companies in the United States, and they dug out all the gypsum, and then the tailings, what the leftovers of what they dig out, they pile up. Those piles contain rare earth minerals. We've got them. The problem is not the raw rare earth minerals; it's having it processed. And there's only one country in the world set up to do industrial level processing of that material, and that is China. That's why China has the monopoly on rare earth minerals. Not that rare earth minerals are actually so rare, they're only found in certain locations. They're actually pretty plentiful,
yep.
but it's the processing, for God's sake. And they don't, nobody seems, our US policymakers just don't seem to capture that.
And one of the things Australia is laboring with right now is our pressure to try to get them, because they were a big rare earth metal processor. Then China pretty much put them out of business because their costs were so cheap in China to do it. And another plan of Deng Xiaoping, he said, quote, "We will have 95% of the market in 20 years." They put Australia out of business essentially. And we've been putting pressure on them to try and get them to resurrect their processing facilities, which are lying latent, but it would be very costly. While we're not doing it, as Larry just indicated.
Yeah.
Screw your ally.
Larry, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Syria, because the two forces that are somehow supported by the Trump administration, the Kurds and the current government in Syria, the current, the HTS government in Syria, they have released, because of this sort of struggle, this sort of confrontation you see in Syria, they have released ISIS forces, which we know is of greatest concern, is of particular concern in that region. Even Iraq said send them over to the prisons in Iraq just to avoid any sort of chaos because of these people. These are not ordinary people. These are hugely dangerous people. And we know how much all the countries in the region try to put these people in prison. And what is happening? What is the Trump administration? What do they want to do to just avoid that happening again?
I don't think they know. And I doubt that they seriously have a plan and thought this through. I mean, the contradictions in this are just incredible. And now, for starters, how could you claim that ISIS is up and operating? Didn't it? Donald Trump destroyed them. Nima, why do you hate America?
The CIA is probably
Yeah.
keeping them in a lodge somewhere so they can call them out when they need them.
And in any event, we appointed one of the ISIS terrorists. Well, he used to be part of ISIS, but then he evolved into other terrorist organizations. He's now the president of Syria. So, and they're too busy killing Christians and Alawites. And then here is, longstanding support to the Kurds. I, you know, as I reflect on the last 100 years of U.S. involvement with foreign relations, uh, I view the United States as a malevolent, vicious, evil Lucy from the Charles Schultz cartoon strip Peanuts. This Lucy in that would always try to entice Charlie Brown to try to kick the football. She'd put the football, American football, out. Say, "Come on, Charlie, kick it." Charlie would run up and try to kick it. She'd pull it away. He'd, legs would fly up in the air and he'd fall on his ass. So time after time after time, we get these different ethnic groups. The Kurds, hey, trust us, man. Work with us. We'll help you. We'll protect your people. We'll ensure your interests are upheld. And then it would just fight this war for us. Go into Iran. Go see if you can kill some Iranians for us or whatever. And then when the blowback comes and they're getting killed and they come to us for help, we go, huh, who are you? I don't recall meeting you. We did it. We did it to the Hmong in Cambodia. We and in Laos. We had all these Asian groups that were supporting us in the Vietnam War. We screwed them over. I mean, that is. I'm waiting for someone to make what I'd call the truthful horror movie. And the horror movie would be this: instead of just the zombie apocalypse, it would be all of those people, those foreigners that have fought on behalf of what they thought was a U.S. cause, where the United States enticed them to take up arms, where the United States enticed them to go kill others, that they all rise up from the dead, unite, and come to attack us as payback. Because, what we're doing here in Syria, remember, now more than a year ago, they're celebrating, Russia's been pushed out. Iran's taken a punch in the nose. We've got this thing under control. And today, the two sides the U.S. is supposedly supporting are killing each other, or in a full-fledged war. Turkey is struggling to have influence, and as is Israel. So the only thing we're good at is breaking things.
You can also throw into the pot of the people that should hate our guts, the Czechs and the Hungarians.
Yeah.